I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northeast Regional Advisory Council meeting. I'd like to also recognize a few of the wildlife board members. Looks like we have Kent Johnson, Gary Nelson, Justin Oliver online, and Bob Christensen here in person. Thank you for taking your time, everyone, tonight to come to this meeting. This meeting is being held in person in Vernal, Utah. It's being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is a complex and sometimes emotionally charged issue. We all have ideas and opinions about what's best for Utah's wildlife, and that's why we're here today, and that is a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their ideas and opinions at today's meeting to fill out a comment card, and those should be outside in the foyer. We expect those in attendance to respect those who are speaking, especially those who don't hold views or opinions aligning with their own, and we'll ask that everyone has respectful behavior. And would ask for everyone to be respectful during the meeting. To reduce distractions, we would ask that you put your phones on silent. I'll do that myself. If you do need to take a call, please step outside. We'll start with some introductions. My name is Eric Major. I'm the chairman of this region and represent the public at large. I notice we have Jake Huber offline. Jake, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Natasha, work our way across.
Jake Huber, representing Sportsman.
Natasha Haddon, I'm a wildlife biologist and represent the Ashley National Forest.
Nathan Crapo, represent the public at large. Chris Oline, represent Sportsman. Richard Dealer, public at large.
Willis Lefevre, UNT County.
Colin Crozier, agriculture.
Wayne Davies, agriculture.
Okay, thank you. We will move to item number 2, approval of agenda and minutes.
Make a motion to approve the agenda and minutes as it is currently.
Motion by Natasha. I'll second it. Second. Yes, thank you. Number 3 is wildlife board meeting update. So I can do that. The wildlife board met in January, seems like months ago, January 8th in Farmington. The summary of motions included a motion to approve the agenda, and then also similar motion to approve the minutes of the December 4th wildlife board meeting. There was an informational item about law enforcement and drones and thermal use. Also one on the Utah Cougar update and Utah Fur Bear update. There was a motion to ask the division to look at separating the Bobcat license from the Fur Bear requirements. And item number 6 was Utah Black Bear recommendations, an action item that was made by Chris Robinson, seconded by Ken Johnson, and passed 5-1. And the motion was I move that we accept the divisions of proposals with the new unit and additional pen tags. The Predator Control Incentive Amendments, Rule R 657-64. That motion was passed unanimously, and it was I move that we accept the Predator Control Incentive Amendments, Rule R 657-64, as presented by the division. Item number 8, cooperative agreements for big game or turkey rules, R 657-74. That motion was passed unanimously as well, and it was to accept the cooperative agreements for big game or turkey rule R 657-74 as presented by the division with the addition of an annual report to the Wildlife Board. There was a board appeal by Brandon Jeffs. That motion was passed as well, and that was to authorize the director or the division to enter into a settlement agreement with Brandon Jeffs that would call for a 15-year suspension of privileges, which would commence on March 2025 and run to 2040, and that the terms and other specifics of such arrangements be worked out between council for the division and Mr. Jeffs. And once they're in agreement, the director will be authorized to sign such a sub. That summarized the wildlife board meeting. Any other comments or questions on that? So we'll move to item number 4, and that is, this is an informational item. Mike Wardle, our big game program coordinator, will do that. And I think, like we discussed, if Mike, if you'd like to maybe share some general information for those that are here, that'd be great.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm a new face. I think a lot of you. Mike World, the new big game coordinator. Prior to this, I was a biologist in the southern region. So for the last 8 years, I've been on the beaver, Avant, and Oak Creek units. Trying to fill Dax's shoes, which is tough. Dax is really good at this job. So, but I'm happy to be here. Just to remind everybody, so the informational was presenting the permits that are below the 20% change threshold from the previous year. So if the change in permit numbers was under 20%, those go through as informational, and they're not an action item. Those changes happen automatically. If it's above that 20% threshold, then it comes to the RAC and the Wildlife Board for approval, which is the next agenda item that you'll see. And in the other RACs, especially the Central RAC, there was a desire to learn more about how these permits are allocated and set, what our biologists are looking at. And so I'll take a couple minutes and just kind of walk you through how the population model works, what we're doing with buck-doe ratio, survival, where that information is coming from. I'll try to be brief, but if you have questions in the middle of it, feel free to stop and ask as I go. Our biologists, when they do their population models, we have 3 main data inputs. So the first is herd composition data. So this is gathered through our deer classification in November and December. Each biologist is out on their unit. They're classifying how many fawns, bucks, and does they have. You could think of it like a pie graph, right? If the pie graph is your herd, they're wanting to find out how many does or what percentage of that pie graph is does, what percentage are fawns, what percentage are bucks. It's not like a census count where they're trying to count every individual animal on the unit. We're more trying to understand the composition of the herd. So that's the buck-doe ratio and fawn-doe ratio. You're familiar with those terms. That's where that comes from. And that goes into the model. And then we also have survival data. So if you've had a chance to participate in any of our capture projects, we capture deer throughout the wintertime. We put GPS collars on them. Those GPS collars allow us to get really two pieces of information. One is movement data that helps us know migration patterns, timing of movement, habitat use. But the big thing for our model is that it also lets us monitor their survival. So we monitor survival from December to December. And so if we put a collar on a deer in December, we want to know, does it live all year long? And what percentage of the does that we collar live and what percentage die? And so we call that adult doe survival rate. That metric, when we're talking about growing our deer populations, that metric is huge. That's probably the biggest number one that we look at. If you're at 85% adult doe survival or above, you're going to be probably growing your herd. If you're below that, you could see a decline in the population. And we also catch fawns, 6-month-old fawns. So fawns are born in June. And then come December, when they're 6 months old, we'll catch them, put GPS collars on them, and also monitor their survival. And that lets us know how many adults we have coming into the population each year. So the survival data goes into the population model. And then the last data input is our harvest data. So if you've been hunting, you've had the privilege of filling out a harvest survey, that information is very important to us. That lets us know, if I issue 1,000 tags on a unit, that doesn't mean that 1,000 bucks get harvested, right? There's a percentage of those hunters that are going to go home empty-handed and a percentage that are going to harvest an animal. And that helps us know what that success rate is. So all that information goes into a population model. And a population model is essentially, it's just a set of equations where you take known information. So that's the herd composition, survival data, and harvest data. Those are pieces of information that we know, and it helps use those to figure out a piece of information that you don't know, which is the overall population estimate. You could think of it as if you walk into a gas station and you buy a $4 Red Bull and a $2 candy bar, and you come out and you have $14 left, you can look back and say, oh, I had $20 but when I walked into the grocery store. That's a simplified way to look at it, but that's kind of how the model works. The biologists, so from all that information, we can get an estimate of what our population is post-hunt. So we're talking like December timeframe. The biologists can then look forward and say, okay, based on conditions and based on previous years of survival, I think that my adult dose survival is going to be 80% or 85% this following year. And we can predict forward and guess what that survival is going to look like. We do the same for fawns. And from that, we'll use those buck-doe ratios and fawn-doe ratios again to estimate how many bucks will be on the landscape at the start of the hunt. And then we put the number of permits to it and apply the success rate to see how many permits do I need to issue in order to be at my buck-doe ratio objective after the hunt. Does that follow with everybody? I know that's a lot of information to throw at you right at the beginning of a meeting, but that's in a nutshell what our biologists are looking at. But it's really looking at herd composition, survival data, harvest data, and how do we get our buck-doe ratio and from where it is currently to the buck-doe ratio objective that is set in the statewide management plan. So hopefully that helps today's conversation. Happy to take any questions.
Questions do we have? Those around for Mike. One question I might ask is, the drought is definitely on a lot of people's minds. What's kind of your thoughts on that, the effect of the survival rate? What have you seen in the past with similar years that have had this kind of water shortage?
Yeah, for sure. Drought's hard on deer. Historically, we were always really focused on winter range. The last few years, we've really kind of changed our mindset, pushed towards having good summer nutrition for our deer, because the fat that they're able to store during the summertime is very influential on their survival throughout the winter. So a hot, dry year like what we've had with basically an absent winter, it's not setting up for a great summer. And having said that, I'm still hopeful, right? Maybe we'll get some spring rain. Monsoon moisture is a big deal for deer, especially in the southern part of the state. If we get monsoons, that can help pack fat on deer right before the winter, the fall. So yeah, it's kind of a hide and watch right now. The overwinter survival was high at statewide level. Being a light winter, we had really good survival. So in the short term, that's great. But long term, we are nervous about what's going to happen over the next year.
Is there any inputs in the model to account for that? How it doesn't look good?
Yeah, so again, like biologists have the chance to predict and guess what they think survival will be this coming year. So that's where that would take place. And really with deer, I don't know that we'll see a huge impact until after the hunts. If we have a hard winter next year, if we have a hot, dry summer and our deer don't put the fat on that they normally do, and then we have a hard winter, we'll definitely see increased mortality from that. But if we have another light winter, maybe they do just fine. It's just an unknown.
Hey, Mike. I know one of the issues that a lot of people have is just with the transparency of how all this works. Would it be possible for the biologists that are putting these numbers out to put a little blog together of what for each unit of how they're coming up with these numbers? I know this kind of come up in one of the other racks, but I think if people could go on and see, okay, where the biologists are coming from, that it'd be a lot easier to to promote what you guys are doing. Right now, everyone's just kind of blind, and people don't look for that stuff anyways. So you can kind of find a lot of that stuff, but it's hard because you got to go through and track through all the DWR information. But if for each unit, if the biologists, when they're setting those numbers, put a little, half a page, how they're getting to those numbers, I think that would be very beneficial to the public. Is that something that you guys could do in the future?
I appreciate that feedback. It's honestly, it's hard to know when you're preparing permit recommendations, how much the public can absorb in these presentations. I mean, some of our presentations sometimes are 40 minutes long just for one species and the permit numbers. And I do worry if we go through each individual unit and talk about, the survival rate and the harvest data and everything that can get hours long, right? But I think that
I'm not even talking about the presentations you guys bring to us. I'm just talking just a paragraph that can be posted on the website that kind of describes how they come up with this information. And then we can go look for it on there. But right now, everything's kind of spread out between your harvest rates and population numbers and buck to doe ratios. Like, it's all in different places. And if that's what they're using, all that information they're using, if they could just compile that into one little brief paragraph for each unit, that it may have said it doesn't even have to become to the RAC or anything. It's just something that's there that we can reference to look at it. Because that's the other thing. Everyone don't want to look at every unit in the state. We're here in the Northeast region. We look at our regions, our units. We know what our units are. But everyone else in the state is doing the exact same thing too.
I appreciate that feedback. Thank you. I'll volunteer the biologist too. Like if people want to see that information beforehand, call these guys and go to lunch with them too. I think all our biologists are very willing to sit down, even with the computer, and show them, like, look, here's the model, here's how it works. These are the numbers that I'm looking at, and I'll volunteer them to do that with anybody that calls it. So.
And I hate putting more stuff on their plates because I'm sure they're already extremely busy. But like I said, just something to help would be beneficial.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mike, I have a question for you. Well, and you're aware, talking about the drought, what's coming. The ag end of it and the fishing games have been, DWR has been good, but they might have to step up a little bit more this year because like the upper country has water for like 28 days. And who knows, hopefully we get monsoons and we get the water.
Sure.
But I see come this fall and even this spring, we had a lot of deer, but you've been working really good with just continue working with the ag and it may be a big problem.
Yeah.
Or bigger.
Yeah, we can do that. We continue to work with folks.
Is it appropriate to ask if there's any questions in the audience, public? Any other questions you guys have? We'll go ahead and roll to item number 5, deer permit recommendations for 2026. Anything you'd like to bring up or any clarifications from past questions?
Just that these are the recommendations that were over that 20% threshold that require board approval. Sure. I'll take any questions people have.
So we'll start with questions from the RAC, and we'll move to questions from the public. We'll review electronic comments, and then allow public comments to fill out a comment card, and then have a RAC discussion and motion. So we'll go ahead and start with questions from the RAC on this item. You take the user. Sure. Thanks.
I know the central region had some issues with the Wasatch Mountains West one. Can you explain that a little bit, why the numbers were just up, just to clarify?
Yep, you bet. Get my notes here. So Wasatch West, we had the big winter in 22, 23. They cut tags hard down to about 6,300 permits. Prior to that, it was around 8,000 permits, over 8,000. And then last year, and so we lost a lot of deer during that winter, and the population dropped, and it since has responded and is growing quickly. So like last year, we had a fawn doe ratio of 74 for every 100 does, which is high. That's great. We also had a really high adult doe survival at 91%. So that population's growing. Biologists, there's seeing that they're going to have a lot of yearling bucks, a lot of 2-year-old bucks in the population, and just trying to make sure that they don't jump way too high above that buck doe ratio.
That looks like they jumped up 20,000 deer. in the last 24 to 25. So, thanks.
I see the booklets meant that 20% increase. Can you speak to what's going on there? So that's,
Yeah, Clint loves to talk to these things, so I'll have him come up. While he's talking, I'll just say the buck doe ratio is over objective and it's an increasing trend, but I'll let Clint.
Clint Sampson on the file. Yeah, the last 3 years we've seen increases on buck to doe ratios on the north and south when we've been doing our classifications. Population is slowly starting to climb back. We estimated it this year around like 6,200 animals out there for deer, and so that's the increase.
what was it I guess after the hard winter?
It actually had the highest survival we've ever seen in the book cliffs on the hard level. So what's bad for everywhere else is good for the book cliffs. So.
Hopefully the little farm stuff over this year. Whatever that was, that one.
Yeah. The heat. Yep. So yeah, they've slowly been increased probably the last 4 years.
Just a few more bucks on the range, like we could take it while they're there, type of deal as much too.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I guess to that question, take them while we're there, is it, according to the biologists, is it better to try and take more while they're there, or with the conditions give more opportunity for survival?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Actually, the research shows that carrying more bucks in your population can have a negative impact on your herd production. And so if you think of it with cows, right? Say you got pasture and you can hold 100 cows in there, and if you're trying to grow your herd, you don't want to put 50 bulls and 50 mama cows in it, right? You're going to try and keep your bull numbers low so that there's feed for those mama cows, and just keep enough bulls to make sure that those cows all get pregnant. And it's a similar story with deer. So actually, if you're in a scenario where resources are limited, it's better to carry fewer bucks and have a lower buck doe ratio in that herd to make sure there's not competition with those and fawns.
You guys done a fantastic job last fall in your presentations explaining that, and I appreciate that. That was educational.
Thank you. No, it was Dax probably that did it, but I'll say thank you.
Any other questions from the
When is our when's the mid-year or the midpoint review of the mule deer plan going to be?
That plan was done in, I just looked at this last time. 24. It was done in 24, and it's a 6-year plan with 1 mid-plan review.
And you guys have been. Oh, go ahead.
I think it'll be the fall of 27 that there's a mid-plan review on that.
Do you remember? Did you guys talk about management hunts on all the limited entry units during that committee?
It kind of came up, but it didn't really wasn't one of the biggest issues we talked about in that committee. But it did kind of come up, but it didn't really get brought up for, like, say, the book list or Diamond or doing management hunts or anything like that on those units.
Okay. I feel like we should probably look into that at the mid-year review, mid-plan review, and I don't know. I think those are good enough for the premium units. I don't know why they wouldn't work on the limited entry units as well, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's a common comment from the public, is there's just a lot of grabby 3x4s, but I also have heard and seen that there's been some better bucks over the years there. We're close, so that's a good stuff.
Yeah, I'll add, I think it's worth the discussion at that mid-plan review. I think this last round, I remember it being discussed on a few of the units. I remember specifically the Oak Creek, because I was a biologist over that at the time and came up to talk about that. But there wasn't enough appetite for it to go through there, but I do think it's a discussion worth having with that mid-plan review, because we hear it a lot. So
Also, is during that mid-plan review, is that when you evaluate your buck to doe numbers on certain units, and how those changes will take place if it needs to be, or I know there's been some desire to change that average buck to doe ratio on certain units. Is that when that will take place, or how's that working?
yeah, so that's where it would be set, is in that statewide management plan. If I'm honest, I'm going to try to keep the review to just a review, not a whole full-blown revision. The struggle with changes like buck doe ratio objectives is if we change them every 2 to 3 years, it's really hard to understand the impact and the effect of what those changes are. So I'm hoping that we don't have to make changes to buck doe ratios, but we'll see.
Any other questions from the RAC? We'll move to questions from the public. Anyone have any questions on this item?
What was the total increase? Statewide.
Statewide on general season or limited entry?
General. Yeah. 166 or 8,000, something like that.
Yeah.
It's 1,300 permits, I believe.
Yeah, so general season, it was an increase of 6,425. That includes the stuff that's below the 20% and the stuff that's above. It still needs approval.
Sorry, I couldn't go off and do where you get there.
Yeah, no.
On Facebook. Yeah.
My brain doesn't remember numbers.
This 1,300 number is probably just the ones that are above the 20% threshold. Is that true? For the general season? Or I guess that's just the 3 units. Beaver West, Camas, Washington.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, Miles, do you mind doing a summary of electronic comments?
Okay, we had 3 people submit electronic comments, and they were across the board. One of those people somewhat agreed with the recommendation, one was neutral, and the other one strongly disagreed.
Okay, thank you. We got 1 comment card so far. I'm bringing some up. Rod, do you want to go ahead and address the board?
It's always me that starts it off.
I'll try to remember.
I'll get up and give us like a microphone this time. So, what's concerning to me is to state this, like, biologists will show you a model. How can you show it? Because we had the highest ever recorded snowpack 4 years ago. Now we're on a 3-year drought. What model are you talking about? We're all concerned for ranchers. We're concerned for everything, all of us. And to do a 6,000 increase on mule deer just seems crazy to me and everybody else. I think, that doesn't sound right. If we have a hard winter this year, it's not just us that's affected here. This is, Utah Department of Agriculture came out with videos. This is not just us. This is regional. Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, Nevada, Arizona. This is a huge impact on our drought. And I just think we're all here and we all care about mule deer. I just think it's crazy to do a 6,000. I think it should go the other way and do 6,000 less. And, cutting back 6,000 on cane 6,000, but let's leave it alone, see what it does this year, because we're in a world of hurt. If we have a hard winter this year, they will die. I mean, that's how we freaking grow mule deer is habitat. If we're in for another drought like we're gonna have, heaven help us.
Thank you, Rod. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you out there. Kevin Norman representing SFW. Just so you guys are aware of how we form our positions, SFW is we have a fulfillment committee, which is compiled of all our chapter chairs from around the state. We get together, meet with the division and discuss these topics, much like this meeting, and form a position. So with that being said, we support the division's recommendations. With one exception, there was some concern down with the Monroe fire that they would like to see those permits stay at 900, just to see what effect the fire and kind of pump the brakes a little bit on that. But other than that, we support the division's recommendations. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, those are the two comment cards we have so far. We'll go ahead and move to RAC discussion. And sure there'll be some discussion, and we'll move to a motion.
I have a question for Kevin real quick. In that Monroe, you guys wanted it to be 900, you wanted it to drop because it permit wise there was 1,100 on there now, and you wanted it to drop.
Yeah.
Is that what you guys want? Just clarification. Should ask this question, on the vernal bonanza, the jump in 200 permits, is that just to knock it? Cause I see your 3-year average is 18 and it's in the 15, 17. Is it to bring it back down in to that zone right there? Is that the reasoning?
Yeah.
Kind of what I figured. How did the herd look on that this year up on the vernal bonanza as far as fat and stuff when you guys were doing flights and whatnot?
Yeah, the numbers. Body fat, we had great survival, first of all, last winter. Of course, you can imagine with mild winter like we had, I think we survived that. So because it was a little bit drier some of this last summer too. So for the day we collect that fat data we do our captures in the very end of November. It likes to look up the exact numbers. But we're above average on the body fat, but it wasn't the highest that we've had. We've had a couple years ago, we had even better body fat conditions, but it was still actually pretty decent. It's actually good. So it'd bring up the exact numbers if you want here in just a minute. But yeah, we are growing here on those units for sure. The last two. Yeah, the average. Body fat stuff.
Yeah, or maybe Camarando. I'll have.
So they responded pretty good after that hard winter. Whatnot.
Be the South Slope. So the South Slope data here. Right here. Yeah. So our measurements, not that these mean much to you, but it's in millimeters literally of body fat on an average. It was 8.8 1/8, so it was over 8 millimeters of body fat on average there. Like I said, in 2023, after that hard winter, we had the really, because of the water we did have that year, we had it higher, was up to 11, and that was the high that we'd had on body fat going into that fall after it. But those are also a little bit biased by the fact that on a hard winter, you lose the old, really young deer, the unhealthier deer. Your prime age deer that are really healthy, those are the ones who survive. And so we had a much higher percentage of those that would be in this category that year too. It was 92% survival on those units. And that we've had on our bad years on the south, so we've gone down to 67 and 63%, even on really bad years on the south. So 92 is a great survival rate. We are definitely grown deer the last 2 years.
Next question along those lines. If we have the perfect storm or lack thereof, of not a lot of moisture, persistent drought this summer, and then we have that hard winter, I guess going into that scenario, on the flip side, maybe something that Rod and some of the concerns that I've heard from others besides Rod bringing it up is if, of that 6,000 tags, if there's a certain percentage of bucks that are harvested, that also is that many less mouths to feed. Could you talk to that? Like, what is that ever part of the equation too, of like trying to remove some bucks, knowing that it might be a hard winter and there's not to be as much feed?
Yeah, for sure. I think it goes back to what I talked about earlier, is carrying too many bucks on the landscape can hurt your herd productivity. And so, yeah, it's, the drought is scary, but for sure we don't want to, if anything, we want to take more bucks now rather than have a higher buck-doe ratio going into those nutritionally limited times, simply because we want our adult does and our fawns to do really well, as best as they can, right? And we want our bucks there too, but the bucks are not as important in a population as the does.
Hey, Mike. So I know you guys we keep hearing. Has there been more? So last year, when you guys come up with this, having more bucks on the landscape hurts the herd production. Has there been more studies that's kind of shown that, or is it we still just going off that one main study that had kind of come out like a year and a half ago?
Yeah, the main big peer-reviewed one is that one out of BYU. I haven't seen anything similar with that type of sample size in the literature recently.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if there had been more that had showed that, or if you guys still just going off those same numbers.
I mean, as we look around our state at our own data, I mean, you can look at Antelope Island, right? Has the highest buck-doe ratio, its lowest fawn-doe ratio in the state. When I was the biologist over at Lavant and the Oak Creek, they're separated by a freeway. Oak Creek always had a lower fawn-doe ratio. We were always picking up more deer during the winter that died of malnutrition and other stuff. So I do think there's definitely something to it. I think, carrying lower buck-doe ratios, especially in times of nutritional stress, will help our does.
Sorry, did you say the highest in the state on Antelope Island?
Highest buck-doe ratio. Yeah.
So the most country tag than both.
It's also not what it used to be either. It's the Antelope Island deer herds tanked in the last 10 years like no other. So it's not the cream of the crop it used to be.
So I think you guys are really talking about the same thing I'm talking about, is those high buck-doe ratios. Cutting buck tags is not what saves our deer herd. Antelope Island, the Henrys, the Fonsagon, cutting buck tags isn't the answer to having more deer and a healthier deer herd. Right? So I agree.
Back to RAC discussion. I'm grateful for the management plan that we have, and buck-to-doe ratios on these. That's why I asked if you'd be reviewing that, because I think it's great to have a plan in line. That I see that I'd like to look more, and I know each biologist has different, different things they're dealing with, but it seems like sometimes when I look at these numbers, these buck-to-doe ratio numbers, some areas are increasing tax quite a bit. Some of them are still over the buck-to-doe ratio, and they're not as much. I kind of question that sometimes. I mean, I'm an opportunist kind of guy. I'm an opportunity. I'll never find a big buck sitting on the couch without a tag in my pocket. So I just hope that, as we look at these buck-to-doe ratios, that we hope them biologists and them guys, accountable to work within that. If that be increase more tags and more units, I'm all for that. So I'm grateful to see the increase in tags. So.
Any other discussion items from the RAC?
I'll speak up, say, I'm a little concerned, talking to the public, they really don't want more bucks taken, but I also listen to the biologists and I followed your presentation and listened, and I want to trust you and I want to trust your data. And you're the professional, so just say, I'm really torn which way to go. I don't know that it would be a bad thing to hold up and pump the brakes and see what happens, because there is so many unknowns and there's so I don't know that it's any model we've ever really been to, so.
I do hear from people in the public that feel like there is too many tags for bucks and things, but it's a hard one, because I can see why we're issuing a few more tags in places when you're trying to bring your buck-to-doe ratio down. When we set those objectives in the builder committee to that 15 to 17, I can see that. And I do see how on a drought, it'd be nice to be able to save, but it's also, if the biologists could look in the crystal ball, they would be and they knew the answers, they'd recommend way less, and I know that they're following what the numbers are and what we've set up in that. So it is a hard one. I do get it in some of them where it feels, I think some of the reason why it feels like you just get so many people up on the mountain. And I think that's part of the reason why on the south slope it's really accessible in a lot of places. And I think that's part of the reason why people feel like there's just so many people up there and not as many deer, It's hard to have hunters believe that bucks don't help your population grow. Like it's a hard one to get through some people, I think. So.
Yeah, and to that, I mean, the statement was made, it's hard to find a buck sitting on the couch, but as I listened to the presentations last fall on that single buck over that was along the whole strawberry deal, and massive buck, and that they're not there. I think maybe we do not as good a job of hunting anymore. I honestly do think the bucks are there. I do see now. So
the South Slope also has one of the highest harvest success percentages in the state too. So, I mean, the deer are there; they're getting killed.
Out of curiosity here, is there a specific relationship between, say, we are in a pretty bad drought right now? Is there a recorded relationship between annual moisture and your conception rate on these deer? I can only speak from experience with cattle. I know if you turn cattle out on range and you're in a drought and you got bulls out there naturally servicing the herd, your conception rates go down.
does the deer population respond similarly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think we've seen that in deer. We have seen that in elk, where if cow elk is in poor nutritional state, that can affect whether she stays pregnant or not and has a calf. With deer, you know, we've recorded really high pregnancy rates throughout the state, typically over 90%. And in the research and the literature, the big thing that affects pregnancy rate is if your buck doe ratio dips too low. So if you get below like 10 bucks per 100 does, then you're to a level where you don't have enough bucks in the population to cover all the does. That's been the main thing in the literature that shows an impact on conception rates.
Does, once again there, you know, with your cattle, the younger the bull, the fewer the cows that bull's gonna service for up to a certain, is it the same thing with your deer as well? You know, do we have enough mature bucks out there that can handle the workload, taking care of the does that they need to, you know what I mean? Because your young bucks, to an extent, they cannot keep up with mature bucks.
Sure. I think, is it Derek? Do you have a picture of a yearling buck?
That's not appropriate. Just as good as mature bucks.
Yeah, yearling bucks can breed, and it's funny. People talk to me about like being upset about like 2 points or younger bucks breeding sometimes, and I hope people understand like their genetic potential doesn't change as they get older, right? Like Carl Malone was going to be huge, whether his mom and dad had him when they were 18 or 65, right? It doesn't change much. So as long as we have enough bucks to do the breeding, then we're okay. But I do think it does help to make sure we have an age structure to where we don't want just a bunch of bucks straight out there. So we do have to be cognizant of that.
Any discussion, any further concerns or comments? We filled out a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the deer permit recommendations for 2026 as presented.
Motion by Natasha to accept.
Would you be willing to add to that, to drop that on the Monroe down to 900 if they have that concern? Or?
Well, I feel like if they're worried about feed or forage on the landscape due to a fire, you would want a higher permit number. Because there's more mouths for that landscape to recover. So I guess I'm a little confused by that recommendation.
Like, is that even doable where it's underneath the 20%?
Yeah, it was no change. So we had 1,100 permits last year and 1,100 this year. So it's 0% change. Just to give you a little more information on the Monroe, last year, so we have collars on the Monroe. The Monroe is one of our study units where we've had collars on there since 2010. We didn't have any collared deer that died in that fire, and we did find some that had burned up in the fire, but none of them were collared. And so our fawn survival rate wasn't terrible. We had the fawn doe ratio was in the 50s that past year, so we're not too overly concerned. We had the same discussion like on the Bryan Head fire on the Penguins Lake. That was a similar sized fire, and that hurt recovered. The fire, it can help deer in the long run. So
I kind of look, if I can point out, you know, we've had a couple fires here, and it looks like, at least the one I'm aware of, spent a lot of time in. We grew almost 900 more deer, and the deer population went up. Does that seem true in the fire areas? And we don't help you, but the deer are also kind of benefiting from the fires.
yeah, for sure. And fire can be a double-edged sword depending on the location. If it's a high elevation fire, it burns through a bunch of timber and creates a whole bunch of new nutrition. Definitely we see fatter deer, which means we see fatter does, which means we're going to throw fatter fawns. They're going to have a higher survival rate. And there's a compounding effect. If it's like low winter range and that fire burns through sagebrush and a lot of great wintertime shrubs, that converts to grasses afterwards, that can have a big detrimental effect. So it kind of depends on the fire.
So I'll keep with my motion
Any
I'll
other?
second.
We'll go ahead and do a vote on that one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll oppose. I think it's a good time to hold.
Any further comments on that, Willis?
No, I'd say, I like what the DNR is doing. I love your data. I want to believe and trust. I see it, I live it. And, but there are just so many unknowns with the risk of fire and everything else that, I don't think it would hurt, to hold on this one and wait it out for a little bit and see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes then. Take number seven. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and call Rusty Robinson up for the once in a lifetime commit recommendations for 2026. Any clarifications or?
No, sir. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, go ahead. Open with questions from the RAC.
Yeah, spray for moose or kill them ticks. Is there like ever something to do that, to get rid of them? Or is there a way to get rid of ticks off the landscape? I mean, is there, which I guess that'd be my thoughts, you know?
Yeah, believe it or not, we tried that once upon a time in the central region. We get a lot of urban moose that we have to go capture and relocate. And we tried that when we had them in hand to treat them. It just doesn't, you have to have repeated treatments for it to be effective. And so we kind of gave up on that. But there's some seasonality to the tick stuff. And we think we've seen the worst part of it to this point. Hopefully they can, those ticks will drop off and those moose can kind of recover throughout the summer.
Have you guys seen like where do ticks cycle like the rest of the wildlife? Like you see how you have tick and ticks and then they go down. You see that?
Yeah, and we've been really lucky the last 15 years or so. Our moose population has been really stable. The last 2 years, we've seen some pretty good growth, but then we fully expect to see some declines the next couple of years. So, and if we get, same with all this stuff, if we get the right snowpack at the right time, it can knock those ticklers right back down, and those moose things down. But kind of depending on Mother Nature there a little bit.
Is there still a high rate of DWR worms?
That's something we're trying to look closer at. We don't have the greatest data on Eleophora at the moment. We're starting to look for it more and more. I don't know, I couldn't speak to what rate we're detecting it, but it's hard to look past, the glaring issue right now, which is the ticks. But yeah, that's something we're trying to look a little closer at moving forward.
Can you kind of explain the allocation of the additional Blue Cliffs bison permits and why they are where they are? Maybe there wasn't suggested any archery.
Yeah, you want to speak to that, Glenn?
Sure.
Sorry, could you? Break something.
Just
Quinn
additional.
Sampson again with Blue Cliffs biologist.
Yeah, just an additional, the allocation, how that was decided, 'cause I know there's quite a few permits there, but there's not only certain amounts, so maybe just explain the reasoning behind that suggestion.
Sure. So in the Blue Cliffs, we have the kind of two separate units that we have permits for, the Little Creek or the roadless, and the south are combined. And then we also have the Bitter Creek. And so the new bison plan with the split objective, we're trying to grow at a reasonable rate on the Bitter Creek side, increasing our numbers. We counted 153 adults, and the objective is 250 adults for the Bitter Creek side now. And so we went from 3 permits previous year to now having 15 permits on the Bitter Creek unit. And so that's just trying to grow at a reasonable rate and show that, we see what's going on out there too. And we want to be, good stewards that way. Is that the big?
Yeah, that, and then also like the weapon of choice, I guess, how those were allocated to certain weapons.
Oh,
That was
okay.
my main question, that's been brought up in some of the other acts.
Sure.
I know that they're all, any legal weapon, no archery, is there a reason for that, or are you open to making a change there?
So with the archery, it provides, new opportunities, having, a specific weapon type out there. And we were kind of hoping that would be a tough hunt. And those guys get after it. And so we're seeing, 100% success on those archery permits. And so it's hard to increase archery permits, with having such high success. So we basically added that hunt, hopefully to provide more opportunity and maybe a little bit, less harvest. But yeah, it's showing. Yeah. Yeah, they've gotten after it. So they're a lot better than me that way. But yeah, so trying to, increase those permits. I hope I'm not getting too far off the reservation, Rusty, but most of the guys that are drawing bison permits right now are in it 26 years. And those guys aren't going to want to pick up a bow. Like they're waiting to draw a rifle tag and get out there on their last, go rounds. And so, yeah, I think knowing who our constituents are, who the sportsmen are, that looking to drop permits out there, I would rather, see us keep it how it is.
What is the rifle success? Quite high as well, right?
Yes. The bitter hunt is shown to be difficult. It's still doable, but it's not a slam dunk. And that's, again, the increase of the objective on that bitter herd, because they're no longer just on one ridge out there camped out for the whole hunt. Now it is border to border. And now with Colorado changing their definition of bison when they cross the border, it'll be really interesting to see what happens as we move forward.
Have they killed any, because I know what they had was, like, people had to put in, and then if they seen bison go across the line, then they would do a draw. And I was just curious if you heard if they pulled any names to harvest any of the.
I haven't even heard that.
That's what it was. It was like the residents only. You put in for a draw, and then when the bison went on that side, then they draw your name and go out there. Supposedly.
Is that since January?
That was
forward.
in January.
Okay, yeah, that's
That's what I heard.
Yeah, that's news to me.
Thank you. All right, man.
Mountain goats do anything. UN is.
We call Randall.
Yeah.
Some of you probably remember we had that 23 late winter really hit hard. We had 25% of our colored adults that we lost that year. And so we did get hit hard in 2023. And so that we've had a couple of really good years since. Survival wise, we think we were unable to fly them last year. We planned to try to get a helicopter survey in last August. Could not get a helicopter or be able to fly up there because fire restrictions going on. And they shut it, the North Slope fire that was up there, that shut us down. We weren't able to get a helicopter in there. So I don't have an up-to-date count. We're planning to go this year in August to fly it. I'm a little scared we may run into the same issues with the closures because of fire if we get a fire up there. We have found a way to get the helicopter, we got to make sure we got a helicopter lined up now to be able to do it. So we'll get a better count this year and so all I've been able to get is ground classification stuff, put in a lot of extra work on that the last 2 years though, and we have seen some good production coming on. I'm optimistic that we're going back up where we should be, but we are down significantly from where we were, 15 years ago. The herd was doing a lot better back then. It really was. We were just producing more goats. We've had the concern, we brought it up here before, we've had concerns on the ones, there's certain parts of some of the hunt units are getting, when we get 30% of our harvest as nannies in the past. That really hurts us on goats. They aren't sexually mature until they're like 4 years old and start producing. So when you kill a primate nanny, that really hurts your production on goats. And they are, ultra super producers anyway. They don't win very often, and it's pretty much a one kid production tier and stuff. So there are some things out there we kind of want to keep an eye on there, but we think they are starting to come back around. So we'll know for sure in August when we get to count all of them instead of just the ones I can see from one side of the mountain, which you can imagine. Any other questions? That answer your question? Goats. Any other questions from your RAC? Move to questions from the public. Does anyone have any questions on this once in a lifetime? Summarizing electronic comments.
Yeah, there was 2 people that responded. One of them strongly agreed with the recommendations. One somewhat agreed. Sorry, I guess there were 3, and one strongly disagreed. So just the 3.
I believe, Kevin, you had a comment for this one as well.
Kevin Norman representing SFW. We support the division's recommendations. Also, the Archery Association had made that recommendation of adding 1 additional bison tag on the booklets. We could get behind that as well. In addition to, not to take away from the rifle, but just another tag there. So thank you.
We'll move to RAC discussion.
I like the extra commits out there for the bison myself. I think they've done a great job out there and moved them around, and I think it's a good thing. So I'm for it. I don't really necessarily think we need to add an extra archery permit on there. I think we'll be okay without it, honestly. I understand the reasoning behind that. I don't necessarily think that's a game changer, but that's just me.
I guess this is kind of a question. I know on the Henrys, they increased the bison number of tags due to the drought conditions. Has that been done on the booklets at all, or?
I believe we added that in the new plan to kind of follow along the same drought monitor index, and that we could do, drought permits similar to the Henrys. And I think you see that kind of reflected in this year's recommendations where that objective was raised. And we're also increasing 27 permits just to be really prudent with these drought conditions. So I feel like follow along with the spirit of that, and yeah, we have that ability as well to follow the drought monitor.
Seems like also that spreading of the herd has helped as well, right? There's not just 1 or 2 guzzlers that are turned into powder because all of them are parked there.
Yeah, this region's habitat section has been amazing, doing a lot of treatments out there, a lot of water development, and those bison are really scattered abroad within that unit. So it's been good.
I know I'm seeing bison in places I hadn't seen them ever before the last 2 or 3 years. So they are definitely spreading out.
We ready for a motion?
We are.
I'll make a motion to accept the once in a lifetime permit recommendation as presented.
I'll second it.
Second by Willis. Thank you. Go ahead. Any discussion on the motion? We'll go ahead and vote. All in favor, stand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Sir. We'll go ahead and invite Mike back up for the bull elk permit recommendation for 2026. Anything you'd like to add there?
No, I got nothing back. I'll take any questions.
About questions from the RAC? Oh, there's a few of those out there.
I know last year we got a private land bull only tag here in our area. Can you kind of give an update of how that went? I know there's an increase of 250 tags suggested for this year, or maybe just the reason behind that, what the plan is going forth.
Yeah. Alan, you want to come talk about that? Really? My goal for this meeting was to not get up here to back on the biologist, but that's fine. No, I'm happy to be here. So yeah, I'm Dallin Christensen. I'm the wildlife manager for the region. Last year we did for the first time have a private lands only bull tag here in the Uinta Basin. We drew a boundary. It's basically all private land and inside the boundary. And then those permits are only good for the private land inside that boundary. And we did this because we have a lot of elk that are growing in agricultural areas, and we're not seeing them dispersed to public ground into the mountains. So last year was our first kind of a trial run. We had 500 permits, and the harvest success was quite good. I think it was right around 60%. So we killed like 200, a little over 250 bull elk. This year, we had a lot of good feedback about it as well. A lot of people really liked the hunt. We had a lot of agricultural producers that really liked the hunt. And we had some people that didn't get a permit that would want one. So this year we did increase that to 750, from 500 to 750. The reason behind that is because we want those permits to be available to agricultural producers and people who have issues with elk, so that they can purchase the permit throughout the season if an issue were to arise. You know, this is be the second year. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how it shakes out. Will they sell out as quickly? Will there be permits available throughout the season? That's kind of an unknown.
How fast did they sell out last year?
I think it was within like a week or 10 days, they were sold out really quite quickly.
Well, they held out a little bit. It wasn't.
They did. Yep. But we did have a lot of landowners come to us after the fact saying, man, I sure wish I could have got one of those. It would have been nice to have one of those because of this issue that I had later on. So that's the reason for the increase, is just we're trying to make those permits available to landowners throughout the season. If they do have an issue pop up, then they can send somebody to the store and purchase those. They'll be available to them. We're really trying to put tools in the landowner's hands to deal with these elk that aren't available to the public. They spend their entire lives down on private agricultural lands. We're trying to kind of going along with the private bull tags. We have private cow tags available, private lands cow tags available. So hopefully between those two, you know, we can let agricultural producers handle their own issues and their own situations. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a good program. I just thought it'd be good to hear kind of an update and let everybody hear kind of the success of it. So
I think in the few of the numbers, it said there was like quite a few that didn't hunt about the tag too.
Right. We have heard that from quite a few people that, you know, they purchased the tag because it looks very appealing. It's quite a long season, but if you don't have private land to hunt, then you can't hunt. And so there was quite a few people that did have that happen. Yes.
And I know, I think there's been papers out there that show if you're hunting them on private land and sometimes you can push them to public. Has that been seen in all of these?
That's a good question. That was it being the first year. We can't really, and on the light winter, you know, it's hard to say. That is the goal, though. That's one reason why we implemented these permits, is to put pressure on the private ground. And it's kind of it's part of a bigger picture. We've also decreased our cow tags on the public land, hoping that we can shift the pressure to that private land, give them an incentive not to come down and stay in those private lands, but to go back up on the public land and be available for everybody.
You have had the cow private land for a while.
We have for a while, yep.
So, you know, is that shifting push, you know, or is it just maybe it's the kind of what we got going on in the electronic?
Yeah, it's hard. We get some good harvest on, not every year, but some years we get some really good harvest on the private lands cow tags, and that does displace elk. We know pressure moves elk. So that's what we're trying to do and aiming for. Whether that's happened or not, I can tell.
Did you see any change in the number? I didn't sort of dig in this level, but into the number of private land cow tags. Was there less purchased or just as many? Did that change at all with the pool?
I have looked specifically at that. I want to say, just from looking at it just a little bit, I think that there was a few more cow tags sold just because, they have a private land bull tag. They bought a private land cow tag to go with that.
Thank you.
Yes.
One more on that one real quick, and maybe you have one same, but has there been any detrimental effects of that? Like all the elk now go to the guy that's not issuing permission, or has there been any of that?
We haven't seen that, to be honest with you. Honestly, it lowered the amount of depredation calls we got last fall. We did not receive very many. Most people were taking those permits and using them and handling their own situations. So we haven't seen that yet. Maybe we will in the future, but not as of now.
So in areas that we've had problems, like our kitchen from wherever, is the numbers coming down? Are you trying to eliminate them? Or you think they'll never happen?
Honestly, I don't think it can ever happen just because the checkerboard we have in those areas. We only have jurisdiction when they're on our side of the fence. As far as like eliminating them or reducing the number, we are quite aggressive on the permits that we do give out in those areas, and we encourage landowners to let people on to hunt, to harvest those animals.
So it's help.
So it's helped. It has helped. Yes.
They're not even with the dairy.
Well, not as often.
Okay. Good job. Thank you.
Any questions on our side?
On that Nebo one, I know there were some questions on the other racks. Basically, the biologist, he's seen a ton of bulls on the landscape, and that's why he feels like they can handle a few more tags in that, right?
Yeah, and the average age is still high. They've been increasing the last few years. The age still isn't coming down. They're still killing old bulls. And like you said, they flew this year. They physically counted 380 bulls. And you put the siteability on that, you're about 500 or 600 bulls. If you look back to like 2010, that was the last time we had a high number of permits on the Nebo. We were at 144 permits. At that time, they only had an estimated population of 1,100 elk. Now we're double that size of population on the Nebo. So yeah, he felt comfortable with increasing that much.
That's interesting because I run cattle on Nebo.
Oh.
I don't see them. I'd like to go and fly and see what you're doing. Literally, a year ago in November when we put our drift fence down, I seen like 30 head. I've not seen elk on Nebo when I rode wild in Nebo. What part of Nebo? Don't keep them on the south end because I'm like, I don't see it. It's interesting you say that because I don't see them.
Yeah, Rusty was on some of that flight and knows the area better than I do.
Tell me where.
Privately. Back when I was a real biologist, I used to manage the Nebo unit. But that fire really helped that population explode. And, yeah, I was on the flight this year. The objective is 2,200 elk, something like that. And we counted, I think, 2,300 elk. And so we've been really aggressive on cow tags, and bull tags. We saw a lot of elk, a lot of bulls, a lot of mature bulls. So
Is it possible you get elk moved from another unit up onto it? Is that just curious?
there's a little bit of that, especially in the east side in the winter from the Manti, a little bit of back and forth. Our collar data doesn't show that there's a lot. Anecdotally, we know what happens, but it's not thousands. The elk are there. There's a lot of elk on that unit.
I'll pass along the west if you'd like more elk on your allotment.
I look at it both eyes.
Another, I think a comment maybe that we had seen was, in regards to just feeling that there's a lot more pressure up in, I'm thinking, or discussing about the Uintas and you know, outfitter, non-resident pressure too. Have we seen any sort of uptick in the percentage of, maybe this is a Wendy question, so she feels good about calling it, but how's our non-resident percentage of number of tags being purchased on this unlimited, like archery permits, for example? Our non-resident, what's the non-resident interest, I guess? Is it changing?
Yeah, I'll defer to Lindy. Luckily, she's online. She'd know better than me on that.
Yeah, make me feel useful. Thank you. I appreciate it. No, I'm pulling it up right now, but it's been pretty consistent over the years where it sticks around 10%. Let me just double check real quick as I look at my archery numbers.
And with this past season,
Yeah,
rates increased as well. Is that correct? I think it's right. Or is
it
that-
didn't go into effect until September 1st. So some people got it before the fee increase and some got it after. So it just depended on when you purchased it. But we've been, over the last 5 years, it's ranged between 8% and 11% of those tags go to non-residents. So it just kind of varies depending on the year.
But you're not seeing that went up substantially or?
No, I haven't seen that.
Do you also have like harvest success numbers there? I had a gentleman ask me about the youth any bull permit, and he felt like there was a lot of pressure on, again, the Uintas for youth hunters. And I was like, I think that's an interesting take on that. I think we discussed 10 other things that might affect what his concern was, but do you know like what the success rate is on that youth hunt? I know we had it at 500 a year or two ago, and it's gone to 750.
Yeah.
Mike,
Mike might have that quicker than I do. Do you have that, Mike?
Yep, I do. So this isn't specific to the UNS. This is at statewide level. Last year was actually a high percentage success. It was at 42%. To give you some perspective, we've had years 28%. We've hit that 40% mark before, but usually we're around like 30 to the mid 30s.
and then now with the mandatory harvest information, like if we really want to try to answer his question, you would now have at least areas, right? And units that you could say, well, the youth hunters in this area, there was this many of them and this many killed.
Yeah, we can look through the raw data. It takes a little bit,
Right.
but we do have that ability.
I kind of had the same question along the lines of spike elk. You guys ever look at harvest rates on each unit? Now that we have 2 years worth, say, oh wow, we're really a lot of spike hunters on this unit or this unit, and they're really hammering them there. Like, do you look at that at all, or?
Yeah, our individual
I've never seen
biologists,
it. Do you share that data at all, or
it's in the annual report, I believe.
is it? I just didn't see it like.
I mean, that thing's like 200 pages long, so that's tough. But yeah, we do. We have that broken down as far as how many hunters went to the book list, how many went to the Monroe, how many we information.
Is there a simple, where would we find the hunter satisfaction information? Is that also an annual report?
I think it is. Let me look real quick. We have that information too, and
Because that'll also be something, right, that we'll be able to look at. There's a lot of speculation of what, spike hunters in the book list experience versus somewhere else. And also how many people are hunting there, how many spikes are being taken. So like that was something I was excited about with that mandatory harvest reporting is you can kind of get some real numbers and not just the speculation or the feeling we'll get.
sure, yeah. Just pulling up.
I think that just hunter satisfaction is a success reports.
So last year, just on. This is the cliffs. Wait, so yeah, sorry, it'll take me a sec, but I can give you that info if you'd like. Yeah. So book lifts percent success on Spike last year was 24%. If you look at other units like Box Elder was 25, 28 on Diamond Mountain, and then some other units like Beaver was 13. So it's par for the course compared to other units.
And I think I may be wrong, but I think a lot of that on or two, it'll link you to those pages, you know, which I use a lot. It talks about success and objectives and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, you're correct. We do have success rates on this.
It's pretty easy to find if you're. All right.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. I forgot we put it on my planner.
There's Derek, hasn't been able to come up to the podium yet. You want to talk about the Wasatch? No, why the numbers went down. I guess I kind of want to point out, like, everyone always says the numbers go up. So this isn't just in general, but this is an occasion you're listening at.
So I am Derek Yule and I manage part of the Wasatch. It is in this region. But yeah, so on the Wasatch, where the average age has been steadily declining the last few years, and it's been holding it right at about 5.1. And we manage that unit for, 5.5 to 6-year-old bull. And I don't know if you followed the Wasatch over maybe the last 15 years, but it was a unit where we started out when I got here at about 200 permits, and we went clear up to almost 1,000 on bull permits, trying to get that average age down to where it needed to be. And so now that we've got there and now it's starting to go below, I think we want to take the same approach as when we were increasing permits, same approach to get back to that objective by decreasing permits. So I don't think that the unit's like struggling. I think there's just a lot of bulls out there right now that are 5 years old, 4 and 5 years old. And I think in a few years, you're going to see that age come back up, and we'll increase permits as needed, to try to, it's hard to keep a unit like exactly one age all the time. It's going to have up and downs, and we're going to adjust accordingly. So that's why the recommendation to decrease permits.
Any other questions from the RAC?
And just one more question. I know we kind of base our tag numbers off of age objectives, and it's been a topic in other RACs about, feed packets and mandatory mandating them, or, there's obviously we have the mandatory report now, I don't, what is the percentage you get back? Maybe just remind us, and do you see that affecting if you got 100% versus 60%? That may be changing some of these units that maybe have a few tags. The bigger, have other tags. I don't see that changing. Some units have 15 to 20 tags, with that. Do you think that could change tag operations there?
Yeah, obviously the smaller the sample size, the more opportunity for bigger swings in average age. And we'll see it. You can see it in some of these units with small numbers where also the age jumps, then it jumps back down. And so our biologists are looking at that, considering that. For most of our units, we're over 60% return rate on those teeth. So we've never felt like we didn't have a sufficient sample size. And that's why we've never made it mandatory. So every hunter gets a tooth packet. They have that option to send it in. And we've always felt like we had an option.
We'll go ahead and move to questions from the public. Any questions on the health recommendations?
Okay, in regards to elk recommendations, got 3 people again. I think the same 3 people made the same rating on each of them. So strongly agreed, somewhat agreed, and one strongly disagreed.
Thank you. Kevin, I'll invite you back up.
Kevin Norman, SFW. We support the division's recommendations, with one exception. We had some concern on the Nebo that it was too big of an increase. Guys there that hunt the Nebo a lot wanted to recommend just keeping those permits the same without a big increase. So that would be our stance. Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and move into RAC discussion and comments. That's on the overall recommendations.
I know on that, I think it was in the Central RAC, they made a motion to increase all the late archery tags. Would just wondering if anyone have any heartburn with doing that?
Mine's on that one. What was the reasoning behind that?
It just gives out extra opportunity. They're already a low harvest percent rate. Like most of the units are only getting like 1 or 2 elk killed for that hunt, and they just saw it as a way to increase opportunity on a hunt that's really tough and challenging, but can still give people a chance to get out and hunt. So I think they made a recommendation to increase all of them by 5 permits across every unit. Which a lot of them had already increased too, but
Are you making a motion?
no. Well, I was just discussing it if everyone seeing what everyone's thoughts on it were. I'll make the motion if that's what we want to do, as long as no one objects to it.
I was just gonna clarify, I was in the northern region. Most all at the statewide level, those hunts are around 20% success. Some of them have been 0, some of them have been 50, and we don't have, I think we're totally fine if that goes through. I don't see that is a major biological issue. I think there's room to grow those.
I thought I heard a complaint about some of those from those hunters that there's cow tags going on at the same time. That makes it harder for them.
Yeah, and in my opinion, if you're putting in for that hunt and there's cow hunts going on, that just goes along with that hunt. This is
That's because same thing. It's like you kind of know what you got when you're putting in for that hunt anyways. It's not gonna easy.
Shouldn't drop a secret that'll make the hunt easier.
I could definitely get behind that. I mean, most people know it's gonna be a tough hunt, gets people through the point system. It allows people to get out and hunt if they want it, so I could definitely get behind that, Jake. So.
okay.
Same here.
Yeah, if we'll just include that in any motion we made. If I don't know if everyone else has something else they want to, any other changes they want to make, but when we make a motion, I'd like to include that. Just a 5 permit increase across the board to the recommended numbers.
Yeah, any other subjects we want to discuss in motions? Don't like the ag producers and everyone's liking the private land bull elk like that.
Yeah, I thought it was a good deal. It worked. I know it helped me along with Dallon's crew. We lost our total production, so it was of hay, so it was nice to that's something to do. No hay to put up.
I'll make a motion to accept the 2026 bull elk permit recommendation as presented with the addition of, was it 5% archery tags for the late archery season? Is that what you wanted, Dave?
5 tags per unit.
5 tags per unit, okay? So accept and presented with 5 tags per unit on the late archery elk hunt.
Motion by Rich. Second.
I'll second.
Second by Richard. Any discussion on that item?
Jack, why did the archer hunters get everything? What about the rifle hunters, the muzzleloader hunters?
Because archery guys don't get everything. That's a good point.
Yeah. Rifle hunters and muzzleloader hunters already take a large percentage. This is just a super tough hunt. If you talk to anyone that's had this tag, it's not an easy hunt. They are, it's a very difficult hunt to hunt these elk in December with a bow and arrow. So it's just an increased opportunity that gets people out in the field without increasing take by a substantial amount. If you're given rifle tags during that time, it's going to be, 80-90% success rates.
Give it to the youth then. But neither here nor there. Whatever.
I think it's in one way, it's like, so that would be 5 guys that would draw a late archery tag out of the pool that's potentially going for any level of that too. I think that's kind of what you're saying, Jake.
Yes, it's just an increase in the opportunity that, it gets people out of the pool, puts them on the 5-year waiting period. So.
Any other discussion? We have a motion to accept the pull-up permit recommendation for 2026 with an additional increase of 5 tags per unit on the late archery. Go ahead and take a vote on that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Close.
And Natasha. Natasha, is there, you'd like
I
that?
just feel like if that was something that the biologist recommended, as they enrich the information.
Going to comment on your opposing vote.
Oh, I think we ought to just go with what the division just proposed. And instead of helping one group.
All right, thank you. Motion passes there. Thanks for the discussion. Go ahead and move to Pronghorn permit recommendations for 2026. Mike. 3 more.
Yeah, sorry.
Any questions from the RAC on the Pronghorn recommendations? Yeah.
I got some question. So that's the vernal unit. I've noticed the population has taken a hard nosedive. That population's decreased substantially over the past 5 years. I had this tag 5 years ago back in 2020 and had it again last year, and it was a night and day difference. Do you guys know what's happened with the herd and why the population's decreased so much on the vernal unit?
Sorry, Clint had to step out for just a second. Part of it, I think the hard winter hit them hard, and then the drought conditions really impact them. And so I help manage a neighbor unit on Bonanza, and the fawn ratios have been low. I think it's just they've been kind of getting hit harder. Those areas are just so much more dry, and so I think it's a combination of that hard winter hit them, and then the dry conditions, that fawn recruitment's low, and we haven't had chances to get good flights in, just availability of our airplanes. So, but we know, like from our classification data, that it's been hitting fairly hard. But success rate, that's something that's, I was surprised. The success rates on the hunts are still really high. They
did drop significantly this year from what they had done in the previous 4 years. I kind of went through those numbers, especially the archery and the muzzleloader. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was night and day difference between 2020 and last year as far as just finding antelope even. There are still some out there, but it was a drastic difference.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, it's something we've seen with our classifications but with our management plan, and we're trying to manage for the harvested aged bucks. I think, gosh, off the top of my head, I don't remember Bonanza or North Slope, one of those finally got within that objective. And so, we're still trying to manage to that objective. And I know success rates, I didn't look at clinics on the Murnau, but they're still relatively high. And so,
yeah, the last year it dropped down to a 2.9 for the age with a 3.8 for the 3-year average, but it's been trending down hard. It was a 4.5 in 23, 3.9 in 24, 2.9 last year.
yeah, and that's kind of by design, because our management plan directs us, to that, the 2 to 3 year old buck. So that's kind of by design with our current management plan.
Yep. Yeah, and I knew that. I mean, even on the agricultural areas, the deer, or not the deer, the antelope are just, the numbers were way down from what they was. So.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think we've kind of seen that. But we're also still trying to manage that harvested age of bucks. So it's kind of, balancing between the two.
Okay.
Like I had a close story, so Mr. You will probably have to answer this one right now. So Mike Bench, what's going on with Mike Bench? I mean, I've been associated with that for years, and last year I actually had a muzzleloader tag, and there is no antelope out there.
So
What's the success rate?
success rate on the muzzleloader hunt, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I think it was around close to 80% success. Archery was over 90, so it's a pretty high success rate for those weapon types. But we are managing for that 2 to 3 year old buck, and it's still over the objective. But this year we did recommend a decrease in permits, just because the overall numbers we feel are decreasing a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We did do a capture out there a couple of years ago to try to remove some of the pronghorn that are in the depredation situation in those fields in Pleasant Valley. And that helped. Like, some of those landowners now are not having to deal with deer. I mean, they had 400 head in their fields, and that's significantly down. So that may be part of it as well, because some of those are moving back and forth from public land. But overall, I think for buck numbers, it's still pretty good. Success rates were really high. But we didn't increase this year on permits. We kept them the same, even though it's slightly above the objective. So we just feel like that population trend with these dry, I mean, they obviously are going to be better when we have moisture on the desert areas.
Overall, why the 2-year span there, 2-year-old buck, you want them to be this stuff?
So that's the thing with pronghorn, and for these guys to talk to a little better, but some of the largest pronghorn ever killed are 2-year-old bucks. So they hit maturity in their horn growth super quick. And so that's why we did the 2 to 3 year old. I do have I had a collared buck out there this last year that just died, and he was 10 years old. So there's bucks out there that are making it. He lived 10 years out there. So.
What was his horn growth like?
He wasn't very big at the end of his life. I think his body was huge, and he had like giant. He was a dominant buck, but he had his horns at 10 months.
Did you see that, like, when he was 2, though? You feel like for him?
Well, I didn't follow him since he was 2, so I mean, we just collared him when he was probably 8, so probably. But we have seen like a lot of the big bucks are the younger, 2 to 3. So.
Good income.
Let me just say thank you to this RAC for asking questions about pronghorn. Most people usually don't. They're an underrated species. They're awesome.
Questions on board. I'm seeing right. I was looking, Derek, now I was fact checking. I was just trying to remember if they were. It almost looks like the night and bench might be the same numbers. Does that seem right?
Yeah.
Well, that was 10 less. It's the same ones.
I did notice the vernal was 10 less. No, if we need to, I guess we could say something about that if you feel like we're. Tell me, I guess check me.
Hey,
Might and bench permits stayed the same as last year. The vernal unit dropped 10 permits.
Looks like Diamond Mountain, but now it's just stayed the same.
Did you guys you said you captured some and transferred them a few years ago on the Might and bench. Did you do that in the vernal unit too?
Did we bring some of those Parker problem work? Long time ago.
Oh, yeah, we took some off the ladder deck.
Okay, so we captured some off the vernal unit out of the ag fields. With Alan said, didn't hear that.
Arizona.
Yeah, they went to Arizona.
Within the last 5 years.
Did we trade for some bucks from Arizona?
Yeah, we got bighorns later. It was a good trade.
As long as it was a good trade.
How did those antelope fare in the transplant this period? Did they do well down there? Or?
Yeah, so I'm not sure specifically on that one. I can speak to last year. We caught some of the pronghorn on the Parker and took them around different places. And we did see a fairly high mortality rate. This was the first time we've been able to put out a lot of collars. And we did see higher mortality rate, which we actually see also similar rates with deer. Like when we used to move deer, that was around 50% mortality rate. But after that first initial month or so of post-transplant, their survival was matching the population on the unit.
Question maybe for local, but with these added tags that we've added significantly the last few years, South Maine, especially, that's been where I have experience with it, but you notice more interference with ag because we're pushing them back on private where they're not being pursued as much. And, so what are we doing there?
That's a good question. With the buck permits, there's still a low enough number that we don't put that much pressure on the overall herd. We have worked quite hard with our agricultural producers. Pronghorn, they live in the desert. The units we're talking about, the vernal bonanza, the anthro unit, Might bench unit, it's desert country. It's really dry. And when you turn a pivot on and grow alfalfa in the middle of that, it's hard to keep them out. So we've worked really hard with our ag producers over the past couple of years because they were being heavily, they had a lot of damage from pronghorn. So we've had to really work with them to try to reduce that damage, find a point where, we can both kind of be happy. There's a few pronghorn, but they're not feeling overwhelmed. And we've done a pretty good job, as it's been mentioned. At one time, we had 600 pronghorn between two fields in the Mighton area, and now there's significantly less in those fields, which sadly kind of does go along with having a reduced population. But we're committed to not growing those animals on the backs of the ag producers if they don't want them. So that's just kind of the dynamic of the pronghorn population there.
I'm just thinking that in our private land health tags that we have, maybe that's a consideration of something to look at in the future. We don't use some private land only. Don't look at health tags now. Mags, recoup some of that damage. So.
But you guys have been giving out buck tags to the landowners anyways, haven't you?
Buck tags?
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure I've seen some come into the taxidermy shops that were private landowners that got tags for having land.
Yes, there's a few landowners who have a lot of pronghorn on. We kind of, through our mitigation plans, we do give them a couple buck pronghorn permits in exchange for the damage they received by the population.
Any other questions? Any questions for the public? Summarizing down.
Alright, pronghorn, there were 2 people. Sorry, no, this numbers are wrong. 3. One strongly agreed, one was neutral, one strongly disagreed, so. That's
Big votes, so maybe.
Yeah. There.
Kevin, I think you have right here.
Yeah, sorry, Kevin, representing SFW, we support the division's recommendation from these things.
How about some RAC discussion and a motion? I've just in talking with some folks that have hunted like the night bench, I've hunted, but it's been a couple of years. Probably hunted when there was a lot more antelope, but there has been some concern about that. So I don't know if it felt like that was one we could ask for a slight reduction. Definitely support that. Any other comments? Entertain a motion at this point.
I'll make a motion to accept the pronghorn permit recommendations for 2026 as presented.
I'll just made a motion. Any discussion or second? One second. Second. Any discussion or comments on that? Go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, pass unanimously. Thank you. All right, do we don't need a break, do we? Or do we go let's keep muscling through? Okay, number 9, antlers permit recommendation for 2026. Time class one.
Yeah, final one. I'm happy to take any questions. Maybe actually, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll just start by saying, because this question's come up in the other racks, with antlerless animals, really this is where we're looking at managing overall population to the population objectives. With the drought, elk are something that we're going to be monitoring this summer and communicating with Forest Service and BLM and making sure that we don't have elk populations that are causing range damage. So we have the opportunity in August to bring in more cow permits if we need to this summer, if the drought just gets worse and our biologist gets to a level where they're like, crap, I should have issued more tags, and we can come back and do that.
And I think the discussion on that was the process of that would be the alternate list.
Correct. Yep, those names come off the alternate list for that.
Mike, have you ever done that in the past?
We have, yep.
So huge concern with the cattlemen because their numbers are going to be great. And so with that, you know, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we think we started doing that like 3 or 4 years ago. We started coming to the board in August.
Cow moose, is it just purely opportunity to have a cow moose hunt? Or is it, they're really, I mean, you know, we're having moose die from ticks loss right now, or ticks eating them up and whatnot right now. So, I mean, it's came up in the other racks and all. Is it just purely an opportunity hunt?
A couple different reasons we hunt cow moose. There's 2 units we hunt cow moose on, Morgan South Ridge and the Wasatch. In case the Morgan South Ridge, it's over objective. So it's an opportunity for people to harvest cows and try to get down to objective. And with regards to the Wasatch, that was a very targeted hunt where we get a lot of good conflicts with moose. You know, moose on freeways, things like that. That hunt was designed to maybe, hit those spots a little bit that are easily accessible for people and hopefully keep those moose out of urban environments and provide. That answer your question?
It is. Are we seeing a bit more of it? Are we still seeing quite a bit of urban conflict with them as well to be able to keep it up, I guess?
Yes, it's a constant thing. A couple of years ago, I think, in the central region, they moved 10 moose in 3 days or something. It was wild. Obviously with the mild winter we just had, I don't think they've had that many moose calls. But it's always an issue. Coming into Park City, Beaver City, Midway, on I-80, it's a constant thing that they deal with in central region.
Well, those moose that you do move, how far away do you move them?
A lot of them go to the Nebo, which is up to establish a little population on the Nebo. It's kind of neat. And some go to like a different side of the Wasatch, the southern end of the Wasatch, and then some of them go to the Manheim. So it's just kind of neat plan. At least in the central region, I couldn't speak to where the northern region is.
We're gonna ask if moose transplant well. They're just probably really heavy.
They're heavy. Yeah, you gotta have like 8 people on a tarp, but they typically, they do really well after you move them. They're hardly, what's that. Yeah, sometimes they fight back. They punch you, beat you up a little bit like that. Yeah, so I just got a question on some of these over objective elk units. I know it came up last night. I was thinking it's kind of the same thing, but how does the state determine there's controlled hunts, control tags, and certain units in the state? Like there's 5 that I did some research today on. Most of them units are really close to objective. We're still using them, which I think is fine, but it looks like there's some units that are quite a bit over objective that have been for quite a while. And maybe just how do they determine when they utilize that technique versus just issuing cow tags that are 30% success and, less people on the landscape if you have 2 tags in your pocket. I just see some good things there. So how do you determine what units to use that on and what units not?
For sure. It's going to come down to the local biologist. So the biologist there is going to be the one who recommends making a unit or having antlerless elk control permits available for a unit. A lot of our units that are over objective, oftentimes we're running into issues of like private land in the northern region where a lot of these units are CWMUs or private land and we can't get hunters. We can issue more tags and all we do is decrease success and make people angry sometimes. And so it's unit by unit, and that's why really we rely on the biologist to decide if that's a helpful tool or not. We've tried, and we've really increased the number of tools in the toolbox that we've had for managing elk in the last 10, 15 years. It used to just be that, we had public cow elk tags, and that was our main tool. But now we have these private lands only tags, the antlerless elk control permits. There's also things with CWMUs where if they're over objective, is it a percentage based thing, Darren, where they have those available for the CWMU? Yeah. So we've got more tools in the toolbox. A lot of our big public land units, they're a lot easier to manage. Really, a lot of the times where we're consistently over objective and struggling, it's on these units where we have a lot of private land.
On the state, if you have any problems getting count numbers, give me a call. I'll help you out with that. Keep pretty close tabs. What's the first way? Is there any? I know you allow. This is kind of personal, but if you allow night hunting for coyotes and stuff, how about allowing that for farmers' fields with kind of like the landowner bull tag when they cow tag and let us take care of them when they're there.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of fun doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
We're keeping doing too.
That's a tough gate to open up. You know, in those scenarios where we do have cow out that are like hitting an alfalfa field at night, and then by the time the day comes, they're gone. That's a scenario where we have to look at other tools in the toolbox, like us coming in and removing them at night, or we're looking at buffer zones or a depredation hunt. If we know, the cow elk are here at night, but then they're over here during the day, and we could potentially call a depredation hunt and have hunters try and target it there. Or we can be there at night, either hazing or removing too.
But when they're there at night and then they're on the checkerboard during the day, the bug wire is only about that far.
Yeah. Even the basin step situation. And I don't know if Dallin has anything to add to that, but that's kind of my take.
One question came up from the public is why we're still issuing cow tags in the book list if we're under objective. And I know a lot of that was due to, we got a lot of older age cows out there, some granny cows. Do we still have that out there? Is that still an issue? Have we knocked that down, the number of that age class down some? Just
Talk to that, Clint. I don't know that we've caught cows in the last year, not sure what ages.
Yeah, Clint Sampson again. Yeah, we haven't collared any new cows for probably 3 years, something like that now, but we were finding that they weren't breeding back. If they had a calf, especially if they were older, that basically took all the resources they had, and so the following year they would be dry. And so I think that we're on the higher end as far as age with those cows, and those permits, it's not really driving it down. And so I think they're useful, and I mean, the more we're learning about drought out there and just looking at the landscape, the more we can keep those animals moving and cover new ground, because they don't really have a migration. They basically stay where they want to stay until either the snow drives them out or somebody chases them off. So I think, the more we can kind of move around the landscape, the problem.
do you see a lot of people getting more on the deer winter range, or is it pretty much across? Because I know that was an issue a few years ago when we wanted to try to knock some of them elk off the deer winter range to help the deer a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you can find elk right when you cross the white, all the way to the ice steppe at all levels. And so, I think we are making split tags that way.
Any other questions? RAC. We would ask if any of the public have any questions on that list item.
Same story. One strongly agreed, one neutral, and one strongly disagreed. So.
Kevin,
Last one, thanks. Kevin, SFW, we support the division's recommendation. One thing, had some guys with some heartburn on the Parker, just where it's kind of been all over the place. Parker doe antelope, it's kind of been all over the place the last few years, so they wanted to pump the brakes a little and recommend 200 doe antelope permits on that rather than 250. Other than that, we support the recommendations. Thanks.
any comments, discussion from the RAC?
I kind of like the idea of, I talked a little bit about moose. I know it's been a hot topic, so I could get behind maybe reducing the tags. I'm not totally against doing away with that. I don't know if it's been mentioned in other areas. Sometimes it's hard to get those back on the book, but like whenever we do that, could get behind introducing those tags to, you know, 1 or 2 tags to try to, you know, ride out these issues that they're having right now, and hopefully we'll have a strong winter and not a bad issue in the future, but, you know, help that population. So
If they were to say, remove that hunt, how hard is it to get, like, we didn't have any tags, how hard is it to get it back? I mean, because I know you mentioned one rack, that you'd like to keep just one on there, keep the hunt available.
Yeah, when we started this a few years ago, we had some opposition to it. I don't know if it's impossible to get back, but it's just, you know, so that's just a little bit of a fight to get it back on the books. But yeah, that's what the rec says to do. Our preference would be to, and I think if knowing what we know now, the biologist would have recommended a lower number, but still try to keep it on the books if possible.
also not necessarily to deal with the motion, but just have it on the books to, you know, maybe in the future have the vision looking at those control tags on some of these overpopulated elk units. And use that as a tool in the toolbox to help get these populations back down, and then you evaluate that into the future. So you invite you that with their biologists. So
Maybe even along with the control tag, there also at one time was the ability to harvest your antlerless permit. If you had one, say I had one in the Wasatch, I could also harvest it while I was hunting deer earlier or even later. Correct? That's separate than a control tag, but just another opportunity.
Yeah, we used to have that available where if you drew a deer permit for the unit and you also drew a cow tag, you could hunt them simultaneously. We did away with those. Essentially, it was a nightmare for our law enforcement folks. That was the main reason why. And we felt like we were adding enough other tools to try and replace that. So it's a little different than the antlerless elk control permits, right? Because the control permits, you can have a permit for the unit and then you can go get this over the counter. You don't have to draw both. So that's the difference. So, yeah.
I can see that being an issue for law enforcement. So, yeah. So, Colorado, for example, there's some units that if you draw a deer or elk or any tag, I think there's some that are, I don't know, over objective flip bears, for example. Maybe that's if you draw a certain unit, even having that available for a control tag. I mean, that's kind of the same principle though, right? Those that have a tag can then go buy a control tag.
yeah. Yeah, with us, it's limited to big game permits. So it would have to be a big game tag.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Anything we're feeling like we need to adjust or change?
I'll make a motion to accept as antlerless permit as presented with the changing the Wasatch, dropping 4 tags on the Wasatch Mountains moose tag to 1 instead of 5. That way at least keep it on the books.
I'll second that.
Jake, Bruce, any discussion or questions on that motion?
I applaud it. I think it's a good deal.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and vote on the motion to accept the antlerless permit recommendations for 2026, with the exception of reducing the moose tag on the Wasatch unit to 1 permit. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, we'll ask Darren to come up for the 2026 CWMU antlerless permit recommendations.
Yeah, good. You know, I don't have anything to add, so I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions from the RAC on the CWMU recommendations.
they're just doing on the dead red, they're just issuing a few more tags on it.
It depends, they're actually reducing the number of cow tags, yeah, a little bit.
Trying to look through the notes, I forgot to print that.
They're doing three things on Deseret. They're reducing cow permits by about 65. They added some cow moose tags. They've got a lot of moose up there. They're a little bit higher elevation. They don't have the winter tick issue as much. And then, they're adding some doe pronghorn tags as well.
How are they on their elk objective? Like, what's the theory behind reducing the cow tags?
The unit's over objective. The ranch, we weren't able to fly it this year. We just didn't have the conditions. So the biologist does plan to fly it this coming winter. We felt comfortable reducing it to 360, working with the ranch. The ranch feels like they're about where they want to be with the total number out that they have on the ranch. Our biologists models show maybe slightly more than they have, but they're close. And so we're waiting for a flight. But since they're over objective, they do have the ability to issue a second cow tag. So if someone draws one of these, public draws a cow tag, they have the option to buy a second tag. So last year they had 425 cow tags, but they ran 600 permits through the ranch, between cow hunters getting the second tag. They also offer cow tags to their bull hunters. And so the bottom line for them is we need to get the harvest to maintain that population. And then the biologist also meets with the lost breed area to look at the overall objective. It's not just Deseret that harbors all the elks.
Is that a second tag? Is that across the board? If they offer that to everybody that has a tag, or is it they decide?
Yeah, anybody that hunts them. Again, this is in the CWMU rule, but if you're over 10% over objective, there's some tools that kick in that allow for some additional cow harvest, trying to get those numbers down. It is a challenge.
I'm pretty sure they offer that to their buck hunters and their bull hunters as well, don't they?
Yeah, pretty much anybody that's on the ranch has that opportunity. So that's how they run it.
Any other questions from the RAC? Thank you. Any questions from the public on the side? How's our comments?
Oh yeah, this one had two. One strongly agreed, one was neutral.
Okay. Thank you. Any RAC discussion or a motion?
I'd make a motion to accept the 2026 CWMU and this committee recommendations as proposed.
Thank you, Nate.
I'll second that.
Second by Natasha. Any discussion there? Go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you off easy there.
I know.
Randy, it looks like you're out online. We'll welcome you virtually. For last item, aquatic rule amendments for R657-3C and R657-59A.
Mr. Chair, good to see you. I'm actually filling in for Randy. He is on just in case, but I thought I've been working with him quite a lot on this. And if it's all right with you, I just wanted to read a short statement before you begin your discussion.
Yes. Thank you, Trina.
Awesome. Again, my name is Trina Hedrick. I'm the Coldwater Sportfish Coordinator for the division. Good evening. And I just wanted to mention to you all, just so you're aware, we did not build this proposal that we're presenting tonight. We did not build this in a vacuum. Over the last 6 months, we've been in regular contact with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, including 3 separate meetings and multiple phone calls, emails, and text messages. We kept UDAF informed about changes in our rural language as the rule was being developed. UDAF did ask a lot of questions about the process for purging New Zealand mud snails from fish prior to stocking, but any concerns they had about our actual rule proposal were not expressed during these conversations. In addition, the DWR presented the rule change to Utah's private fish producers in January to a positive response. We specifically engaged with the one fish producer who has New Zealand mud snails. We answered questions that he had and invited him to participate in the development of the rule with no response. The DWR also responded to his request to set up meetings for additional discussions, but he never responded to confirm dates. Ultimately, the goal of our proposal is to balance industry needs with the protection of Utah's fisheries. New Zealand mud snails reproduce asexually, so it only takes one stray snail to start a new population. Currently, if a hatchery has these snails, they have to purge every single load of fish before stocking. And as you can imagine, that is labor intensive. Our proposal moves us to a common sense, case-by-case approach that we feel provides additional opportunities for the private aquaculture industry while protecting our native wildlife species. In the vast majority of cases under our proposal, we'd allow stocking without purging. We would require purging in situations where the stocking could potentially impact native spring snails. Under the proposal also, there are situations where we would deny a certificate of registration request. In those situations, it'd probably be rare and be limited to those scenarios where the stocking poses an extremely high risk to our native spring snails. Our proposal provides critical mechanisms that will protect our native spring snails, many of which have been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act. The main reason that native spring snails haven't been listed is because there are safeguards in place that prevent New Zealand mud snails from invading their habitat. Our proposal keeps the essential safeguards in place, which should help prevent that federal listing. If native spring snails were to be listed, it would be problematic for private growers, landowners, and a federal listing could even impact our public fisheries. The proposal does help open doors as well. Arizona has restricted the import of fish from growers that have New Zealand mud snails, but they have indicated that they're willing to adopt regulations similar to what we're proposing tonight. So this paves the way for local producers to get back into that market. It should be noted that under our proposal, stocking by growers that have New Zealand mud snails would require a certificate of registration. The pond owners themselves request these certificates of registration, so it does not add a burden to the fish grower. And we currently use the certificate of registration review process to protect our native cutthroat trout while allowing some stocking of non-native trout for sport fish purposes. Typically, those are allowed with mitigation measures in place. So we simply plan to adapt this process to the needs of our native spring snails. The bottom line is that our proposal would allow private fish growers that have New Zealand mud snails to avoid the labor-intensive purging process for the majority of their sales in the state while maintaining safeguards that protect Utah's native spring snails. Lastly, I need to mention that we are proposing one additional amendment to Administrative Rule R657-3C, subsection 9, and that's not currently in the RAC packet. As proposed, this rule prohibits any water discharge from facilities that hold fish. However, this requirement is technically impractical as most hatcheries and ponds are designed to discharge water as a standard part of their operation. To address this, we proposed updating the language in subsection 9, part 3B to state that all effluent from holding tanks must be managed to eliminate the potential for discharge into public waters. Private ponds, licensed aquaculture facilities, and licensed fee fishing facilities are exempt from this requirement. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have tonight.
Thank you, Trina. Any questions from the RAC? Any questions from the public here tonight? Is there any electronic comments?
Two people strongly agree.
There's no public comments. Is there any discussion from the RAC? I'd entertain a motion if not.
Make a motion that we accept the aquatic 2026 recommendation as presented.
Thank you. I'll second it. Seconded by Grizz. Thank you. Go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And I'd assume that recommendation includes this, the part that Trina mentioned that was not included in the package. Hey, thank you. Thanks for holding in there too and being patient for the end.
You bet. Thank you all.
Well, I would entertain, I think we've made it through our action items. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Let's thank you.
I second it.
Thank you, Natasha. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. Thanks for your participation, questions.
Biologists and now they're giving us the questions.